I do hope you enjoyed the music section, and it gave me a chance to get a little top up. Leighton was an avid traveller, and influences of his travels can be seen throughout the house, as I'm sure you've seen. Leighton was the perfect host, and he entertained his guests with chic dinner parties, where food was always praised. He travelled to Lebanon in October 1873, and he wrote to his father about his experiences. "Gay and glad was I to land, and Andrew's cool, clean inn overlooking the sea was a delightful haven of rest. And my first meal at a steady table, or real chair, was ambrosial." What a wonderful word, I don't use that enough. We are joined tonight by the fabulous chef Laurence Hamdan. He comes from a Lebanese British family and has lived in London for the past 8 years. His passion for cuisine and the stories surrounding it inspired him to explore his culture through food. You can follow him at Do the Honours or this link below. Laurence presents a menu flavoured by the Eastern Mediterranean basin, a region that Leighton loved and cherished and is celebrated throughout his house. A feast for all your senses. Join us cooking and share your delicacies on social media. Don't forget to tag us, and I'll see you very shortly.
Hi and welcome to my cooking segment. I'll be showing you today 3 dishes inspired by the Eastern Mediterranean basin, which were big contributors to the Arab hall and Leighton house that you may or may not have seen. The tiles, the artwork, the architecture there is all inspired by locations around Turkey, Syria, even Egypt. So I've taken cues from this and I've put together 3 dishes I'm going to show you today with these things in mind. So the first one is going to be a dish called Muhammara, which is typical from the Aleppo region of Syria. And it's eponymously called Muhammara because it's red, and that's because it's flavoured with roasted red peppers and walnuts. Accompanying this, I'll be making some flatbreads, which will be the simplest flatbread recipe you'll ever come across. And it will just go perfectly well with Muhammara. And we'll finish off with a sweet note to the tune of Haytaliye, which is a milk-based dessert and thickened and chilled and then flavoured with orange water swirled throughout. And I've chosen to put honey on top of mine, but you can sweeten up as you like. And this is supposed to be some sort of dish or dishes that you can serve throughout the summer to friends with gatherings. So I hope you try them out at home and enjoy them. What I'm going to show you now is the recipe for Muhammara, which is a dish from Syria. The main ingredient is red peppers, and these red peppers as well as walnuts make up the main flavour profiles of the dish. And as you can see with the walnut, before I put them in, I've just lightly toasted them in the oven until they get a golden hue on the outside. And what I've done with the peppers is I've just roasted them in the oven for about 20 minutes until they get this char grilled skin, which we're just going to remove, and it should come off easily. And this is the part that we're going to use in the dip. So this is a dish that comes together in one pot, or in one blender in this case. And the way we start is with the peppers, which we're just going to tear into our blender, just to make it easier to bring everything together in a bit. They're all going in one go. Next is the walnuts. So we're going to use almost all of them, but we'll keep a handful on the side just for decorating at the end. About 3 or 4 is a good amount. So we'll just keep these, and the rest of them will go in. The point of this recipe is that it's not supposed to be too finely ground. It's going to be a bit chunky, so we really want to know that there's walnut in there. The rest of them we'll just keep at the end. Then we have half a teaspoon of paprika, 2 tablespoons of the Aleppo pepper, and I love this pepper. I think it has a great flavour, but if you prefer to use one, that's completely up to your own taste. And then I have here 30 grams of breadcrumbs I've measured out already, and that's all going in. Perhaps some of you might do it a bit cleaner than I am doing it right now. And then tahini, 1 tablespoon. Pomegranate molasses, 2 tablespoons. Two. And then the lemon juice. So I have here the juice of half a lemon. That's all going in. And this will just give it a tanginess, but will also help to loosen it all up. And then some olive oil, which will sort of bind everything together. And I recommend starting off with 2 tablespoons, and you can always add more later if you find that it's a bit too dry or too thick. So that's just going to go in. And then we can add some pepper now, but I recommend adding salt, most of the salt a bit later. So let's just start off with about half a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. That's just going to go onto the blender like that. So at the end you should have something that looks like this. So kind of a orange hummus-like consistency. But you should still be able to see some grains of walnuts in there, some little chunks in there. And it doesn't matter if it's not completely homogeneous. If there's some chunks, it just adds a bit of texture and character to the final dish anyway. But to finish off, the leftover walnut pieces, I've just cut them up. And now I'm just going to use them on top as a sort of decoration. And this is just sort of like a visual reminder for people of what's in the dish. So some of the walnuts, final sprinkling of the Aleppo pepper, which just this other kind of red just plays off the orange and just gives it the most wonderful color. And then the yellow of the olive oil to finish off. And there you have Muhammara. So this is actually one of the easiest recipes for flatbreads that you'll ever come across. It doesn't need any yeast or any sourdough starter. We just rely on the natural products present in the yogurt, and we get a lift by a bit of baking powder, other ingredients, so just all-purpose flour and salt. So it's really just a handful of ingredients and it comes together so fast, there's no proofing time. So we just start off by putting all the ingredients into a bowl. So I have here 150 grams of plain flour. I'm not going to sift them. And equal quantity of yogurt, so 150 grams of yogurt. And just group this all inside. To this, we're going to add 1 level teaspoon of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of salt. And I'm using here rock salt. So if you're using table salt, then you might want to use about 3/4 of a teaspoon. And we just mix all of this together until it starts coming together into a ball. And we're just mixing all of it together until it starts clumping into a ball. And at the beginning it's definitely going to seem a bit dry, but just trust that the yogurt will do its job. It can definitely absorb more of the flour than you think. So avoid the temptation to start adding water or more yogurt at this point. And at some point you'll see that it starts getting a bit too difficult with a spoon, so that's the point where we would switch to using our hands. Of course, we make sure our hands are washed first. So we just keep going. And at some point, it will start forming balls, as you see it coming together now. And this will just take a few moments to do. Then we get a ball like this. And this size ball will be enough for about 3 or 4 small to medium sized flatbreads. So this is a flatbread recipe that doesn't really need any kneading at all. But what we do need to do is separate out the dough into the size of breads as we would like. So I like to do this just on the work surface directly. So spread a bit of flour and take your dough out, which should be a bit sticky. That's completely fine. And a bit of flour will sort of stop it sticking to the table. We're not really going to need too much, but we're just going to sort of like make it so that it's not so sticky that we can't do anything with it ourselves. So just a bit of working, a bit of there. So you can see the flour now is not sticking to my hands. It's working quite smoothly, and it feels sort of very light in your hands. It feels malleable. And just a note that this recipe probably wouldn't work with gluten-free flour. So if you are able to eat gluten, I recommend just going for the regular all-purpose flour. Okay, so I'm just going to put this into two halves and make sort of 2 medium-sized ones. So there's our first half. And you might find that when you're working the dough into the flatbread slices themselves, you might need to top up the flour on the table a bit. That's just because the yogurt will keep absorbing the flour as you work with it. So yeah, just to make life a bit easier for yourself, just be generous with the flour on the table. So there's one, and I like to keep them a bit thicker. I like them to be a bit puffy. But if you like them to be thin and crispy, then go ahead and keep working them until to the size that you want. I've left them here. I have them about half a centimeter to 1 centimeter thickness all over, and they will also puff up while they're cooking. So don't worry about them being too thin. So the very last step is to actually just cook the flatbreads, and we're not going to be frying them, but we do want to make sure that the pan we're cooking them in is nice and hot, and that it has a small amount of oil at the bottom in, preferably some kind of neutral oil, like sunflower oil or rapeseed oil. And just swirl that around a bit. And the pan has to be nice and hot, and then we can add in our first bread. So it's just going to go in. And it should take about 4 to 5 minutes on the first side, and the next side will take a little bit less. So when a few minutes have passed, you can check the other side and see how it's doing. If it has this golden hue at the bottom, you know that side is ready. It's ready to just turn over, so we can just do that easily. And we see that it has even color all over one side, and we're just gonna do the same on the other side. And when you see that the second side has become nice and crispy as well, nice and dark in some places, it won't have the same consistency of color as the first side because it will have risen in some places more than others, and that's completely fine. But this one I can tell is done, it's cooked all over, there's no bits of dough that look raw anymore, so this one's done. Just slide that onto a plate. And ready for the next piece. making sure I can still see if there's some. So here are our finished flatbreads. I got 2 out of this recipe, but you could also double up and make more, or you could just make them smaller. But when we open them up, we can see inside just how fluffy and light, and they smell so good. And these will be perfect with the Muhammara that we made before. So the recipe I'm bringing you for dessert today is called Haytaliye, and it's one of the simplest recipes that you'll ever come across, and just as rewarding because it comes together so quickly and in one pot. So what we all really need is milk, and we can use any kind of milk. I've done this same recipe with almond milk or soy milk, and it works just as well. And we're thickening it with cornstarch, and then we're going to flavour it delicately with some orange blossom water. And the orange blossom water brings a sort of childhood nostalgic element to it, for me at least. And it's just a subtle flavour swirled throughout, it's not overpowering. And this dish will come together first of all on the stove, and then it will sit in the fridge to set. So this recipe starts by simply putting almost all of the 300 milliliters of milk into a pot, just straight on the stove. I'm going to reserve a little bit of the milk, and this is because I'm going to slake it together with the cornstarch. So I'm just going to put that onto a gentle heat for it to come to start bubbling, and then I'm going to mix the corn flour with the milk. And this together will be the thickening agent. So now that I'm happy with the consistency, it's time for us to decant this into whichever ramekin you see fit, or a bowl. The important thing is that it's going to go into the fridge after, so I've chosen to use ramekins, and I have these 2 terracotta ramekins about my person, as one does. So I'm just going to pour them into here. So after a couple of hours in the fridge, or preferably overnight, your Haytaliye puddings should look like this. They should be set, but still wobbly. And it doesn't matter if you notice some cracks along the surface. This is almost inevitable, and it actually just adds to the charm of the puddings, I think. So at this point, you can choose to flavour them however you like. So one of my personal favourites is with carrot jam, and this is a homemade one that I made recently. So I just put a little bit on this one. So this one I will make into carrot, and this one I will put with some good quality honey with some honeycomb inside. And I like to finish with a final flourish of pistachio, which just adds a bit of crunch and texture to the pudding. And you can serve it just like that. Okay guys, so there we have it. These are the 3 dishes I wanted to show you. We have the Muhammara, a dish of roasted peppers and walnuts, typical from the Aleppo region. We have the flatbreads, which are a perfect accompaniment to the Muhammara, and then the final sweet note of Haytaliye that you can flavour as you wish, but I've gone for honey and carrot. So I hope you try these recipes at home, and I hope you enjoy them.